Greetings, YouTube. I just stumbled upon an article written by Kevin Draper for the New York Times dealing with board games, a potential board game that never actually saw the light of day because the publisher, after having announced it, decided not to actually go forward with its production. And it was called Scrabble for Africa. Um, and the title of the article is, should board gamers play the roles of racist slavers and Nazis after the cancellation of Scrabble for Africa? Where do board games go from here? Now, I understand the fascination with board games, the details that one can get into. I watch a lot of games played by a guy named John from the channel Many a True Nerd, and he does some really deep stories and background and historical context for his games dealing with the ancient world, like the Greek era, starting before the rise of Rome and going forward from there. And he's done some medieval stuff as well. And he knows the history of the ancient world really well. It's like listening to a miniature dissertation when you watch his content when it comes to that topics. The closer you get to our time, John knows less and less. And when you start talking about the modern era, the fact that John can actually tie his shoes and cook, prepare food for himself is kind of an amazing thing. But he knows the context. He understands it. And from the name of the game, Scrabble for Africa, you could probably gather what the game is about. It's about 6 European countries all trying to carve up Africa, trying to get the biggest share for the purposes of making themselves really, really wealthy. The Africans don't fare well in this game model. And in fact, you have to put down revolts. You could actually instigate them in your players' territories to try to slow them down. It's gamifying the brutalization that is the colonial era, and it's just twisted. Now, apparently there was a very large thread, no, actually not apparent, that's not really surprising, there was a large thread on a gaming board, a gaming board, discussing this game that was at that point just being talked about, going to be published in the near future. And but 2 months after its announcement, it was pulled. And they eventually closed the topic because one of the moderators says, because it's beginning to veer political. Veer political? The game's name is Scrabble for Africa. I read the phrase veer political, and I'm thinking, you sound really white. And this is coming from the whitest white boy that ever walked out of White Town. And then there are other game designers are talking about, defending their games that also take place with the atrocities against indigenous people, both in North America and other countries. And guess what? They're all white. One guy's like, well, the response I got from the public was fascinating and a little scary. Yeah, it was fascinating to you because you're not one of the indigenous people. You're not from a culture that was oppressed and almost wiped out by European powers. You're from the group of people who did the oppressing. So yes, for you, it can be at a distance and it'd be a Mr. Spock fascinating kind of thing. But for the people that lived through that, or rather, for their ancestors that didn't, it has a much different message. And I'm really glad a game called Scrabble for Africa got the kibosh, that it did not see the light of day. But the unbelievable, obtuse ignorance of some people in the community of gaming who think that somehow it's okay to gamify colonialization. I've got a game that I have not actually done a review of because it is essentially a fantasy version of the colonialization of the world. The continent that they're colonizing has got a bunch of different indigenous groups, which just happen to look a whole lot like Native Americans and Africans and things like that. So it's really, really horrible in that context. And I'm like, Why would you want to play in this setting? Why would you want to be the invaders in this? And I mean, the game actually has some stuff in it that I think is still salvageable, some mechanics and some classes and things. It's D20 based. Pathfinder, it might be Pathfinder, I'm not sure, like first edition. But I would have to completely rewrite it from the ground up so that the colonizers fail. Because I will not tolerate colonizers, people playing colonizers in any game, whether it's a board game or a tabletop role-playing, that I'm in. And if somebody thought, hey, let's play Scrabble for Africa, I'd be out the door in 30 seconds. And anyone I was with, I'll say, I'll be in the car. I am not going to play a game like that. And I don't think a game like that has any bearing in the real world. It's just horrible. Why would you want to game? I realize that you want strategies games. I get that. You want complex things. You want games that take 7 hours to set up and take 14 weeks to play. Yeah, I understand that there are people that love that kind of thing. I am not one of them. There are people who like to put together 5,000 piece puzzles that are one color too. I'm not that audience. But you have to understand the context those things are from. If you pull them out of the context and look at them in complete isolation, you're just going to come across as an insensitive asshole. A bunch of white people sitting around playing, let's play Scrabble for Africa. Let's carve up the African continent and see who can get the most. No, go play Monopoly. At least you're not oppressing anyone. You're not gamifying the rape and murder of an entire continent. This is just astounding. And this article's from August of 2019. This game is contemporary to us. This is not something that was created in 79. This is 2019. If it were written in 1979, yeah, I could understand why it exists. But now, how can you be in such a degree of cultural isolation to think that was a good idea? Oh, I know how. You can be really, really white and think your worldview is the only one that fucking matters. Just astounding. There's a reason my little blinky rainbow lights aren't on today. This isn't a pleasant discussion of gaming here. This isn't even a dark and moody discussion of some freaky role-playing concept I may have come up with. This is just being appalled at how utterly atrocious some gamers can be in their insensitivity to the world around them. To think that you could gamify the colonialization of the world for your entertainment is stupefying. Or maybe I should say it isn't. Because I encounter really, really white people that are this incredibly culturally ignorant, sadly, every goddamn day.